Comes in 3, 2, 1. I'm Loraine Ballard Morril, and we are celebrating WDAS FM's 70th anniversary, and we're bringing in a lot of real special people to help us celebrate, and one of those is Kenny Gamble. Hey, Kenny.
How you doing, Loraine?
I am good. Now, you practically need no introduction, but of course, you are one of the great songwriters along with Leon Huff. You founded Philly International, and you also started very early on at WDAS. Tell us a little bit about that. You were young, and you hung out with some of the jocks there, right?
Oh, yeah. This was my hangout place, WDAS, but it wasn't here. It was around on Edgeley Drive, I think it is, around the corner. And I really enjoyed being able to come in. Well, my first time here was I walked out here from South Philly.
That's a long walk.
It's a long walk. From 15th and Christian, I walked all the way out to WDAS. And I had Pat Gordon. I had a group. We had a group.
Right.
Pat Gordon, his cousin Ronnie, and Pauline. And we all walked out here to WDAS because we made a record remember the Penny Arcades?
Sure.
Where you could go in there and you make a little plastic record. So we brought our record out here to get Georgie Woods to play our record.
Did Georgie play it?
Not at first, because a guy named Otto was at the door.
Uh-oh, he was security, right?
He was the security, Otto. He was good people, though, man. And then George came out. And that's where my friendship with Georgie Woods really started.
Yeah, tell us, for those who don't really know, there's a whole new generation of young people who have no idea who Georgie Woods was. Who was he to you?
Georgie Woods was a great man, you know, and he was a kind of like the unofficial leader of the African American community. I mean, he was the person who gave me and many, many others a start in the beginning, not only in the music industry, but during those days you had promotion men, you know, and you had there would be card games, and I mean, it was like
it was a scene, right?
WDAS was, I mean, that was the place to be, you know, for the music industry. And Georgie Woods was the guy who was, well, he always said Georgie Woods, the man with the goods. And he really was. He was a community activist. And he would break a record, which you can't do today. It's a total different thing. He would say, it's so nice, I'm going to play it twice. So fine, I'm going to do it one more time. So Georgie Woods and Jocko and all of these guys, they were personalities, number one. Mm-hmm. And that's when radio had a personality.
Well, you know, one thing that I heard Georgie Woods say of you is that you did a lot of socially conscious music, and that was really what the station was, too. At that time, it was the voice of the Black community, more than not just music, but in other things, in the politics that was happening then, in the civil rights movement.
I agree with you. And Georgie Woods was the leader of all of that. He was the guy who stuck his neck out and for the community. He had... And during those days, there were shows that he and pretty much John Bandy, who was Lord Fauntleroy, called his name, and they gave shows at the convention center for the NAACP. And they used to call them the Freedom Shows. They would be packed and jammed. You would have people like the Temptations, the Four Tops, have the Dells, you'd have all kinds of people, and they would give those dollars that were made to the NAACP so that they could continue to fight for justice for the African American community. So Georgie Woods, I remember one other thing too. My youngest brother was in Vietnam in the war, and Georgie Woods, he went to Vietnam. He went to Vietnam. He's talked to all of the troops, and yeah, he was a role model. He was a role model for me. Girard College, Georgie Woods was right there with Cecil Moore and Freedom George and Freedom Smitty. I mean,
all those folks who
he was unbelievable.
desegregated Girard College.
Yeah, well, a lot of people, look at Georgie Woods and they say, well, why did he do that? Because that was in his spirit. His spirit was, and he grew up in the South in New York, and he knew that it was going to take a fight in order to get freedom. He's still fighting for good education. I mean,
well, that's the legacy that you continue, because that's what you fight for: good education, community, affordable housing, all those things.
All of that. That's true.
Yeah.
And hey, Georgie Woods. I guess. I was with him all the time. I was with the coming to DAS before I could even drive. In that time,
how old were you?
I was like 15, 16 years old.
Okay.
But it was amazing how things rub off on you, and it wasn't just Georgie Woods. Georgie Woods was the image of the disc jockey. Not only here, but all over the country. There was, in every city, there had to be at least one guy on the radio that was fighting for freedom. And so when you look at Chicago, you look at a guy like Rodney Jones, and you look at Baltimore, you had a guy named Fat Daddy. That was before Butterball came along, But radio is an important instrument, and during those days was even more important. Radio.
Also, I think that back to the music, there were a lot of musicians like you that weren't able to get their records played on white-owned radio stations. So black radio played an incredibly important role, right?
Oh, yeah.
To get your music out.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, when I first came to WDAS, it was WDAS AM. The FM division was playing Polish music. The guy's name who owned this station, his name was Max Leon, who I used to shine his shoes for him. And I used to go to the store for him once I got into the station, Because first they wouldn't let me in the station. And then all of a sudden, before you could realize, everybody's looking for it. Where's Kenny at? Where's Kenny? Because I used to run to the store, get them sandwiches and everything. But FM radio, when FM radio came in, it changed the whole spectrum for black music, because AM radio had a certain frequency, but it didn't come close to the power that the FM stations had,
right.
And so when we had records, and it was beautiful for me because I knew everybody, and the guys used to say to me, Kenny, sit in for me for a minute. And of course, I played my own records, that. I played Intruders and all of the Philly groups, but it's...
So you were very much a part of the fabric of that radio station. They knew you had befriended, and they became reliant on you in a lot of ways for certain things.
The guy who really kind of got this station really intact was Jimmy Bishop.
Tell us about him.
Jimmy Bishop was, when I think of people who helped us along the way, Jimmy Bishop comes right at the top, because he was like the program director, right? And he had a company called Arctic Records. He used to, he recorded me. He recorded all the young guys around here in Philadelphia. And in addition to recording people, he gave people an opportunity. I think Bishop liked to produce records too, and he had a good ear. But Jimmy Bishop was a guy who gave a lot of people a chance. And at that particular time, his wife, Louise Williams Bishop, and his kids, so we all knew each other. Even today, when I look at look at James and I look at Louise and the whole family. It's they're still around and they're getting older. And it's a story to tell about black radio.
Well, back to Louise. Louise Bishop had to have been one of the few women on radio.
Right.
At that time.
Well, she's been 3 or 4 different personalities. She was Tiger Rose once.
Oh, really? I did not know.
Yeah, because she used to do what is it? Sagittarius astrology.
Okay.
Yeah, so she had a show like that on FM, because FM was a whole different animal, because music even changed. And so Louise was on FM, Jimmy was on AM, because really AM was still really strong right at that particular time, but it didn't take long before FM became the power source, because music, everything sounded different.
Right.
It opened up the whole engineering part in the studio, because instead of just having 4 tracks, instead of just having 8 tracks, you had 24 tracks, you had 48 tracks. I mean, the music, you could separate music and whatever. And
so the quality of the FM signal also changed the way that produced music.
That's correct.
Yeah.
And so Bishop, when we were talking about Jimmy Bishop, he had a relationship with a guy named Frank. Frank, I can't remember Frank's last name, but they had a studio, and we used to be at that studio just about every night. Huff, myself, Norman Harris, all of us would be up. You had artists like Hall & Oates that was there. You had every artist pretty much from Philly. You had Barbara Mason, Yes, I'm Ready, all of these great songs that was involved. And so it was a place where people could hang out. Let's put it like that. Instead of being in the streets, we were in the studio trying to make records. And you had guys like Norman Harris and Roland and Carl Chambers who played guitar or piano. But being around that atmosphere, they developed themselves into being arrangers. And they could not only read music, they started learning how to write music. And many of the records that we made, they were the guys who did the arrangements and whatever. So music is it's a wonderful thing, especially when you love it, when you love music. We wrote a song like that too, called "I Love Music." Remember that?
Okay. There's so many stories I know that you have, but I wonder if there's any particular story that just kind of sticks out for being colorful, outrageous, just kind of like something that people don't really know about WDAS and your experience there.
Well, WDAS was, it was the Uptown Theater. And, bringing shows into Philly, it was one thing when you look at WDAS as a radio station, but it was an enterprise, because it brought all of the acts in town. I mean, the Uptown Theater, Georgie Woods and Jimmy Bishop and WDAS was the vehicle to bring this talent in. And say, for example, a guy like James Brown or the Motown Reviews, which was probably the highlight of everything here in Philadelphia. And, when they'd be here for like 10 days, And so I would be there 10 days when it was there, And I think what it did was it created an enterprise, And I don't think none of us really knew exactly how much impact it had on the Philadelphia community. And so that's why it's so important, just to go back and grab one of the things you said, it's so important to have education. so that you can understand that the things that we do, they have ramifications, you know. And so the Uptown Theater, where you could get in and see a show for 99 cents at that particular time.
Yeah.
I can remember me and Butterball, we used to give hops on Sunday afternoon, you know. And Butterball, he would be, every day he would be on the air. He took it to a whole nother level, Butterball did, you know. And he would be pushing those shows. And Broadway Eddie, you know, from Camden, he was involved. I mean, as I sit here and talk to you, all of these names are coming up, you know, and you couldn't have made it without, it's a team that even these days right now, you know, 10, 20 years from now, you guys will be able to look back and say, wow, look what happened, you know, 10, 20 years ago. So
I wonder if you could maybe just say what WDAS has meant to you all these years.
WDAS meant everything to me. I mean, it was my home away from home, number one. These are lifelong friends. This was not a relationship because I was part of the WDAS family, and I still am. And so it's a different world today. It's a different world, but it's the same world because excellence counts. And I take the lessons that I learned from Georgie Woods and Jocko and Jimmy Bishop and that old gang, Butterball, you know. Hey, look, just one little thing about Butterball. Butterball, he met his wife over my house. They came up, sure. I mean, so this was a personal thing. This was, I mean, we were really, really, all of us were friends. I used to babysit Louise and Bishop's children when they had to go somewhere. They called me up, Kenny, can you watch the kids for about an hour or whatever? But that's the kind of environment that it is. So WDAS was. To me, what did it mean to me? It meant everything, and I give everything that I know about. I give the credit to WDAS because we could have 100 great songs. I was just telling DC, I said I got songs that we've written that's never been recorded that I think are good songs. If nobody play your music, you don't know whether or not you got a hit or not. So the thing of it is, and how do you get to the people? You get to the people through the radio station. So the disc jockey is the guy, especially a disc jockey with a good ear. That he plays music all the time. His whole life is music. And you take your record to him, and if he say, hey, man, I love this song, you say, man, I got something. You know what I mean? Because it's the disc jockey that takes care of everything.
Well, Kenny Gamble, I want to thank you so much for coming up and sharing some of your memories and opinions and remembrances of WDAS as we celebrate 70 years.
70 years. Wow. That's beautiful. That really is good. Let's go for 70 more. And praise be to WDAS so that they can continue to enlighten the community, because our community really, really needs WDAS. Not just a radio station, but as a member, a participant in our community. So I appreciate you asking me to be here.
Well, we love you, Kenny Gamble.
Thank
Kenny
you.
Gamble, founder of Philadelphia. Co-founder of Philadelphia International Records, along with Leon Huff.
Yeah, Leon Huff. There you
and
go.
a longtime friend of WDAS.
Oh, yeah.
We thank you.
Thank you very much.
I'm Loraine Ballard Morril.
That's good, Loraine. That's better than doing it in the